This podcast is sponsored by Communicate and Connect Counseling, where we have a team of therapists who provide individual, couples, and family therapy services, all tailored to meet the needs of military and veteran families. To learn more about our services, visit www.communicateandconnect.com. You're listening to episode 56, How to Make a Military Marriage Work, with Darrell and Veronica Williams. All right, welcome back to the Communicate and Connect podcast. I am pretty excited. We have a guest on our podcast today, Darrell and Veronica Williams, and they were a military couple, are a veteran couple now. And so I'm so excited to have them tell us how to really make military marriages work and navigate through military life together. So would you guys mind just telling us a little bit about the two of you?
Sure. Darrell and Veronica Williams, been married for 25 years. So it'll be 26 years on September 5th. Interesting fact about us is we both grew up in Compton, California. I went to the same middle school and high school. Didn't date, but we had similar friends and hung around the same circles. And for us, our interesting thing was we had a long distance relationship that started after our 10-year reunion. So being able to navigate that and talk to couples about serious questions and really getting to know each other. We have that type of background and experience to get past, as we call it, the surface talk and get
Yeah.
to the thing where you get to really know each other. And it was just really interesting as we'll get more into the questions about, how we end up coming together.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you want to add anything, Veronica?
No, I think that's pretty
Okay,
good.
that's pretty good. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I
Well,
I would just say that how our friendship, really developed into getting to really know each other, as Darrell said, from surface talk to really deep conversations that were within boundaries as to what single people should be talking about and discussing at that point. And then that leading us to realizing that there was more than just being about friends between us.
yeah. I I think, you said that you guys were long distance, and I know so many couples, military couples who are dating who are long distance, but even after they're married having periods of long distance, and I could see how you would really need to somehow get to those deep conversations kind of quickly because it's so hard to stay close and kind of connected when there's all of that. I can't see you and hug you or go on a walk with you. Was there anything that helped you guys be able to have those sort of deep conversations?
oh, great question. I think one thing that helped was we were both, you know, in our 30s when we got married. So we had pretty much
Mm,
went past all of the thing of kind of getting to know who you are and your career was already established. So I think for us, and like Veronica said, our faith really was helpful because first of all, we were friends. So it's like I always wanted the best for her anyway, just as a friend. And then with the faith part, it's kind of like you have that goal of, hey, what do you see, yourself doing in the future? What are those type of values? So we were already aligned that way.
oh,
And like I said, when we came together, I was working with teenagers. She was working with children in the ministry. So knowing that we already had kind of that background of helping others, right? It wasn't going to be a
yeah,
conflict, but it's going to be one that we actually completed each other because we already had that similar interest.
And I think one of the key things about when you meet someone that has the same faith as you and that they're just not attending church,
mm,
but they have the deep relationship that you have with, for us, we're Christians, so that we
mhm,
have with Christ. You want that person to really have a relationship versus just coming to because that's the other person's desires or wishes, but you want to be there because it's after the marriage where you decide that you cannot keep up with that expectation that that person has on the type of person that they wanted to meet. But I think in being in a friendship, we already knew what each other was like when we served God and when we served our church and how we participated. So that made it easy for us. However, we do see that that being a very critical piece for those that do have some type of faith where they're committed to a church organization. And you really want to make sure that that individual has the same alignment of commitment as you do.
Yeah.
And even if they are, they're on target for growing to that place, even if that's not where you are. So that's what I would like to add there.
And then for those that may not be faith-based, we always say that their values should be aligned,
Mhm.
right? As long as your values
Yeah.
are aligned and you have those similar long-term goals, the relationship can still thrive that way as well.
Yeah. I really like that word, or like the word aligned that you guys keep saying, because I can see how important that would be and how you guys had that. Like you were friends, so you already clicked, your personalities meshed well enough together, and you were kind of aligned that way. Your your faith and your level of investment in your faith was
Mhm.
matched. And I think, and then I'm hearing also that your similar, I guess, I think I'm going to call it a calling. I'm not really sure what
Yes,
exactly
that's
to
Yeah.
call
exactly
it.
it.
Calling.
Hmm.
Okay. That was aligned too, because I'm thinking that there could be couples who are both, they're kind of aligned in their faith, but they may not be so aligned in their where I'm going and what we're doing, and this is going to be our life together.
Yes, you're exactly right. And I would say that when you find that you're aligned together in your faith or spiritually, you're more of that support for that person and you're not in a competition with them. And
Mm,
that, that's what's going to build your relationship a lot stronger and be a foundation for you to have that stick to itiveness, to stay together, to want to be together and be each other's best friend, realizing that, okay, where we're going, you're not my enemy. We're each other's support, we're each other's help. Wow. For us, we felt like, we were both at a place where we just wanted to be friends, right? We were at friends because he lives on one coast, I lived on the other. And it was really far from our mind, but probably in our personal prayer time, not telling one another, we were seeking God as to where the direction He was leading us because of service in our churches. And
mm.
so, and now we were getting older and we were wondering the direction that God was taking us as to whether He was going to bring us a helpmate, right? And so, um, just becoming friends, getting to know each other, is how it spun up on us that, wow, I like to say that Darrell, he courted me.
Oh,
That
yeah.
was one of the things I mentioned to him. I said, I don't, as we're going to try to take this long, in a different direction, and we are going to be long distance, you really are going to have to court me. I know that it's such a taboo word, but we established a foundation as to what did that mean for each of us and
Hmm.
where did we plan for this to take us, because they're out during the time we were dating, there were so many, I say, guidelines or rules that people placed on each other, the unrealistic expectations.
Oh, yes.
Say if your friend went through it and they tell you about their situation, you be on alert for it, right? But not all relationships are go out in the same direction and are set and based on the same foundation. And that was something to learn. and something to share with others that had a new revelation based on observing us from our dating perspective.
Yeah. I really like that phrase of expectations. Unrealistic expectations really stands out to me because when you said that, I started thinking about, I'm in all of these different military spouse Facebook groups, and I'm just remembering one where somebody kind of ranted and raved about how their partner wasn't responding fast enough to emails while they were deployed. And I was like, oh gosh, that feels like an unrealistic expectation. I see you nodding your head, so I'm glad I'm not alone in that. And it would be hard because I think that, if they were not deployed, I could maybe have some expectations that my partner would respond in a timely-ish manner. But what is realistic seems to be very different, at least like if someone is stateside and like available compared to deployment and lots of different, it just feels a little bit different sometimes for military versus maybe what would be more the norm for a civilian couple. Um,
True.
so I guess I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about any of the things that you guys found kind of challenging about military life together and how you sort of navigated that. I'm hearing friendship was a big part, faith was probably a big part.
And
Yeah.
trust, you
Oh,
have to build up trust because I think with any relationship, I think a lot of people put up boundaries or that unrealistic
oh,
expectation based on their past and based on what they might have experienced in life through observation and witnessing others,
yeah.
especially when it came to military. And so you had to have that deep conversation with your particular spouse so that you can hash out or, discuss some of the things that you're expecting that may not be met. They're not, and is it going to be a deal breaker?
Mm,
But basically, you know, get already preparing for the disappointment because we can expect something off of someone, but that is not something that is of a priority to them. So it takes having that conversation to talk about it. Like, is this realistic if this happens or if that happens? Such as, like you say, is it realistic that when you're, you know, away off, on an assignment and I text you and we might be in a different time zone. Is it realistic for me to expect you to respond back in 5 minutes? Even when we're stateside, can we do that? So you have to understand what parameters to put those realistic expectations on, but you have to also have your own personal experiences and scenarios that you go through.
And I think the other thing for me was since she was not in the military, I wanted to make sure that she knew what she was getting into. So one of the things I did while we were dating was, well, once we knew that we were going to get married, I bought her, it was like a military spouse book, like everything
oh,
that a military spouse should know. And I thought it was such a good book because I wanted her to know everything, right? And then when we would talk later on that week, if she had any questions, she can always, hey, what do they mean by this and what is that? And that turned out to be some really good discussion points because I wanted to make sure it was kind of weird. It's almost like, man, are you trying to scare her away? But that really wasn't the case. I just wanted to be so upfront because although I was not in a deployable unit, the agency that I was in, we traveled just like we were deployed. Only difference is there was a lot of smaller time to leaving versus being gone for a month, 2 months, or 6 months. But it was like a week at a time, back for a couple of days, and maybe out for 2 weeks and back, then out for 3 weeks. So even something like that, I wanted to make sure that I was able to answer any question that she had on, that she was okay with that type of lifestyle, and we talk through what are some of the things that we can do during that time. Where I think sometimes some military couples are like, well, we'll figure that out when we get to it. Like, no, you really want to kind of talk those things out.
Mhm. Yes, and it was a very helpful book because I knew about the military through some friends and family
Hmm.
members that were married to military spouses. And I wanted my outcome or my results to be different.
Yeah.
And I also wanted to make sure that it was going to be realistic for me because it was going to require me to move away from my family, which I was very close knit with, saw almost
Yeah.
every day, talked to every day, and now adjusting to a lifestyle that was going to move me away. I may not see them as frequently as I want or as I did growing up, but having those discussions with Darrell, knowing our family backgrounds is very key in any relationship. And realizing what expectations family may have and potentially their role in your relationship. So that was important for us, and
Yeah.
having that book help navigate me through the processes of military life and what is some of the things we may not experience, but then putting them relative to what we will experience, which is what made that a lot more tactical to handle and talk about.
Yeah. I'm hearing there was so much like intentionality for you both,
Very
every
true.
sort of step of the way, and a lot of sort of forward thinking about the future and how do we plan for it in advance and be as prepared as possible in advance.
And prepare to stay together and
Yeah.
not let our military life get in the way at some point when I did move here. And so learning how like we tell the couples that we talk to, is that our goal is to stay together and allow
Mm.
our marriage to thrive and nurture it in the areas that need to grow and mature or be dealt with that seems a little bit uncomfortable.
Yeah, I'm just thinking right now of people who might be listening to this, and I'm just imagining someone's going to want that book. Do you happen to remember or like know what it was called?
Wow, that was so long
I,
ago. I
I
do not know, but I'm sure they're probably in the 15th edition of it by now.
okay.
But I'm sure if they go to any clothing sales or go
Mhm.
online, they'll be able to find it. It was basically a military spouse book, everything about
Mhm.
being a military spouse. And I know
Okay.
it
Mhm.
was helpful back then, so I'm sure it's even more helpful now because it was just a great tool. And again, the word about being intentional. I wanted her to be as comfortable as possible. I wanted her to know exactly, this is what it's like to be a military spouse. These are some
Mhm.
Yeah.
examples. And I know that listen to one of the other podcasts, you had mentioned that you love a good love story.
Yeah,
So
I do.
let me share.
One thing I was just going to talk about the book, just to say that it was a helpful book. I don't have mine anymore. I've passed it on to two people
Oh,
Which is
already
great.
many years ago, and I don't even know whose hands it's in now. But it was very helpful for anyone that is marrying a military spouse.
Mhm.
I think they even have it where it's even for if there was a male spouse marrying
Yes.
a military,
okay.
a female spouse. So it's out there, and I think it's a very helpful tool,
Mhm.
especially when you're getting into something that you're not aware of or that you need to know what you're getting into. I think that helped take away a lot of any anxieties or fears, and not so much that, but unexpectancy.
Yeah. And I think, I guess I'm thinking of also anger and sort of frustration. Some of the people that I have heard who will say, like, I wasn't prepared for this.
Absolutely.
They, there's so much kind of anger and frustration of, I didn't have a fully informed idea when I made my choice. So I think that is probably really, really important is for people to have an idea of what they're getting into with military life.
Yep, and part of that is the responsibility of the military spouse to ensure that
Hmm.
that individual is going to know what is expected.
Yeah.
Um, And that's on all levels of ranks, especially if there's a leader role, and even if your spouse is on the leadership path, learning all of those demands that are there are the expectations that go along with it, so that you can be a support and understand the process. It would, for some, it's not as easy, but for me, I didn't find it too hard because of the book
Hmm.
and the level of conversation that we had about what it was going to be like marrying someone with a military background.
Yeah, I think that is amazing that you guys had that. And I am thinking if this was, I'd want to highlight that. I have this picture of like a highlighter in my mind. Yeah. And so I think I was about to hear about a love story. Can I still hear about that? Because I do
Sure,
really
sure.
love love stories.
Sure, because it actually ties into what Veronica was saying
Oh,
about,
great.
preparing the other person. So when I was dating Veronica, I was with the White House Communications Agency, right, which is the agency that supports the president, vice president, first lady. So a lot of travel involved, right? So
Wow.
already knowing that not only was she going to come into this military lifestyle, but she's also coming to this lifestyle where we're traveling just as much as deployed units, right? Like 82nd Airborne, 101st, like our agency, it's nonstop when it comes to traveling. So the cool part about that was when as we were going toward our 10-year reunion, I was doing a lot of trips to California. Because at that time, President Clinton was in office and he loved going to California. And a lot of people didn't like to do the West Coast trips because it was the 5 hour flight and the 3 hour time difference. So I got all of those trips, which was really great. So as we were leading up to our 10-year reunion, I was doing all those trips, and it was almost like we were having these mini reunions before the real reunion. And every time I would get ready to come, someone would say, "Oh, we're going to invite so and so, or we're going to invite so and so." And then when Veronica's name came out, I was like, "Oh, yeah, I remember her. She was like really smart back then." And but she could never make it because she had a lot of things going on with her family and with her church. So one of the
Oh,
times I reached out to her, like, "Hey, I know you couldn't make it." Well, I got her information from a friend, first of all, and said if it was okay to get her information. And then I invited her out to lunch while I was out there, TDY. And, uh, public place, want to make sure she felt comfortable because she knew me 10 years ago, didn't know what the type of person I was now. So I wanted to make sure I was on my best behavior, right? And again, that's when the friendship kind of started. And then months later, we went to the reunion, really kind of like connected. And then after that, I was telling my roommates, like, man, she's really, really nice. I mean, she's doing all these things for her church. She's there for her mom and dad. And I never forget, my friend was like, what if she's the one? And I was like, the one what? Because I totally didn't think about it as anything deeper because at that time I knew I was going to Korea.
mm,
So in my mind, as a friend, it's like I would not dare ask her to wait for me for a year, right?
yeah.
So it was like, no, I'm not going to do that. But the closer we got to the time, I was like, I think she is the one. And our conversations kind of went from vaguely talking about relationships to if I was to ask you to marry me on the scale, where that scale at, So I wanted to get a good comfort because what I ended up doing was I bought the ring because I was supposed to go out of St. Louis to go to Korea, but I found out that I could go out of Seattle. And toward the end of my first part of being at the Washington Communications Agency, I was on the recruiting trips. And talking about Hallmark moments, the last trip that I went on was in Seattle. I knew the hotel, it was close to the airport and all that. And I had bought the ring, had intentions to propose to her, but she didn't know that.
Mm-mm.
And so I said, "Hey, I'm flying out of Seattle. Do you mind coming to visit for the weekend? We can have separate rooms and, maybe just, get to know each other." And she was like, "Okay." And me being the planner that I am, right? So I went to the bar, I mean, the restaurant before. It's like, hey, you don't remember me, but I was here on a recruiting trip. It's like, oh, yeah, we remember you guys. Y'all were great. And I said, hey, I'm going to propose to my fiance or my girlfriend tonight. I want to know, like, is there a particular area I can sit in? Because I know when we were here, we enjoyed the restaurant. And the way this restaurant was set up, they had a real nice booth that sat above the rest of the floor. So if you sat there, people can't help but to see you.
Oh,
So I
so
have
you're on display.
on
Yeah.
display, which is kind of challenging because, again, she's kind of to herself and quiet. And I'm kind of like, I don't care if the world knows type of situation. And I never forget, I talked to my guy, James. He was our guy that was going to be on duty. I said, James, I already know what's going to happen, right? We're going to order food, enjoy our dinner, and then I'm going to order two desserts. She's not going to want one, right? But I want you to bring it anyway. And I want you to put the ring in her dessert thing because it was both covered up. And he was like, oh, this is great. We're going to do it. No problem. Looking forward to it. So fast forward, she comes in, I pick her up, kind of have a little small talk, get to know each other a little bit more, catch up. And then we go out to dinner that night. So I go and like, hey, two for Williams. And he's like, sure, you can have the seat in the middle of the restaurant. So we get up there and dinner's going great. We're talking. And then it's time for dessert. I'm like, hey, you want dessert? And she's like, no, I'm fine. And I'm like, no problem. Hey, I'd like to have apple pie. And James asked her, and she was like, nope, I'm good. So then he brings two dessert dishes covered up. And Veronica's like, oh, excuse me, I didn't order no, let me back up. James brought the dessert, and he goes, here's your pie. Like, okay, I can't wait to see how this is gonna happen. And she's like, oh no, no, I didn't order it. I thought it's okay, I'll eat it. So before I open up the pie, start talking to her, like, you know what, this has been like so much fun, getting to know who you are, getting to know you and all that. And me being in the military, I wrote out my whole thing, what I was gonna say. So I practiced it a little bit, but I wasn't gonna mess it up. So once I got to the middle part of it that was deep, I got on one knee and told her basically, to the effect of, I've had so much fun up to this point. Why wouldn't I want to have more fun for a lifetime? And just wanted to know, would you marry me? So opened up the second dessert tray, and James, right on point, had the ring sitting there inside the box, ready to go. But what I didn't expect was for her to hyperventilate because of
Oh,
So now I'm getting a little nervous because I'm like, oh my God, she's like, I only saw this on TV. I never saw anybody do this before. So the restaurant was so great. They brought her a paper bag. She was able to, get calm again. And, me being in the military, it's like, okay, once she's okay, it's like, and the answer is, and then, um, and then she said yes. And it was so funny because just like the whole restaurant was like, oh my God, somebody's proposing. So it was truly like one of those hallmark moments that like you couldn't have planned it any better. And my guy James, I'm always gonna be forever indebted to him because he was just right on point with everything, no mistakes at all. It was so much fun.
it does sound like a Hallmark movie, and you've got the little twist in there with the hyperventilating, and you don't have the answer. Yeah,
And mind you, I couldn't even answer right away if I wanted to because the
yeah.
people on top that were looking down, they were all clapping and going,
So much pressure, right? To have, I mean, I know you guys had talked about it, and there was some like gauging of her answer before you.
Definitely was gauging. I'm not gonna lie, I was definitely gauging.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
definitely was not expecting that.
Total shock.
I totally wasn't really expecting that at all. I thought maybe, it might happen down the line if that was the
Mm,
case. Because one of the things about him going over to Korea for a year, we had talked about it, and I had said that, he was saying that he didn't want me to wait. And I said, and I don't, if you go over and you meet someone else, I don't want you to either because it's not just those of the Korean racial group. there's also American soldiers that are over there, men and women. So if he was going over there to meet, that was fine because things happen, because
Yeah.
how it works for me is that it's probably when you least expect it. And I think this was a situation that when I least expected it. Of course, we always had long-winded conversations. We had a lot of talk, and we had a lot of fun. We laughed.
Yeah.
We enjoyed each other's company, but that was definitely a surprise to be remembered. That was really a highlight of of our life together.
Yeah.
Then a part two of that was, besides the book, was being in Korea allowed me to do the courting, which was great. So people have to realize this is, before the internet got really big. It was still early into that. So I'm sending her cards, I'm spraying cologne on the cards. I'm sending little gifts
Okay.
and teddy bears. And those that might not know, I will send her little cassette tapes with different love songs on it. And I mean, I took the courting thing all the way to the max. I think it was a lot of fun doing that because it showed her like, this is just how much I care about you. And then the other preparation part, we got to the part where I was going to be there over a Thanksgiving time frame. So
Mm.
I had invited her to come to Korea during Thanksgiving because part of me was, even though I was going to back to a wireless communication agency, it wasn't going to be the same as a real military base. But I just thought, man, what a great opportunity for her to see the far end of what that would look like. So for her
Yes.
to go to Korea, staying at Dragon Hill Lodge and, seeing tanks going down the street and all that, it was like it really painted that picture because I just really wanted her as a friend to know that this is worst case,
Mm.
typical military. I'm not going to be in that situation. However, the stakes are still the same.
Yes. That is such a unique experience, I think, to be able to sort of see what it's like. I'm thinking I had some exposure because my mom ended up getting out, but my dad stayed in. And, when he would deploy, he'd send like postcards of the ships and things like photos. And then I grew up in an army town. And so I got to see things. And of course, when I met my, I guess, now husband, but he would like show me around, but it was all in the US. Like it's in the middle of a city where I could go to the Starbucks down the street. So that is such a unique thing to get a feel for what it would be like. I know one of the we're like a year and a half away from wherever we go next. And so we don't know where we're going next, but one option is to Japan.
Mhm.
It's hard to like think what would life be like. And so wow, what a unique thing that you got to do to try to feel prepared.
Yes, and it was very, I don't know, I can't even describe it because I couldn't, of course, I didn't go off base by myself when I went with Darrell, but I had to make sure I had my passport with me.
Hmm.
When you think about the TV shows with the military at the gate with the guns and really, and I'm talking about the foreign movies with the military, it was just that setup. It was unlike being a civilian living in, stateside without military being around. Military bases were around me,
Hmm.
but they were isolated and they wasn't so blended in with the civilian life as much in the area where I grew up. So it was quite different. It was quite like, wow, is it going to really be like that when we move to the actual place, that he's going to be stationed at when he gets out? But it also enlightened me to realize in going during that, I think I went for a whole week.
Mhm.
Going for that time allowed me to see his military role in the military, in his unit, and it allowed me to see him in his leadership role. And that was
Yeah.
what was compelling to see, and knowing like it's not just going to be here in Korea, but it's going to be somewhat similar, but a different capacity, even in when he went back to the White House Communication Agency. And so I think that made it softer because the tenseness that I saw there in Korea was different from what I saw here when we went to the White House Communication Agency or when he went back there. So it made it a lot easier and circumstances that said, oh, I can handle this because this is totally different from what I experienced in Korea. But it
Yeah.
wasn't something to reject or pull away from. You just saw what the military is really like, not only in the United States, but in a foreign land, and how the countries are really protected. So it really
Mm.
showed me a frontline glimpse
That's it.
of the
Wow.
military. I had brothers that was in Vietnam, but nothing like this. They didn't remain there. So, and they were drafted, not, it wasn't something that was voluntary. And so it was
Yeah.
quite an experience. But I think having the military spousal book as well, along with going to visit,
Mhm.
I that made it more helpful because then I also had the book with me and I was like, you know what, it talked about this piece here. Now we
Mm.
just went there. How is that related a little bit more, to our reality when you leave here? And so I thought that was very, not only to read it in a book, but to also experience it. It was quite an experience that, there you can't really describe it because you're in that moment.
Yeah.
How we respond to the military in the United States is so different than other countries and the extensiveness of it. So I really saw how being in the military on a military base was so different from the freedom that you have living as a civilian stateside.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. And what life might look like as a military couple being maybe way more restrictive if you were living in a different country
Mhm.
compared to if you're stateside. Yeah.
Yes.
Mhm.
One of the things that I wanted to ask you guys about was you said you've been together 25 years. It's going to be 26 soon, which is amazing. And I am really hoping me and my husband,
We will.
I'm hoping we outshoot you, maybe. No,
Absolutely.
um,
Absolutely.
uh, but I'm thinking like, is there anything that you did on a day-to-day basis or like a weekly basis or somehow I'm think there are these researchers called John and Julie Gottman and they talk about couples having rituals of ways of staying connected. Was there anything that you guys kind of made a part of your life as a way to help your marriage through the years and just life, but also through the military?
Sure. Like we tell a lot of the couples, we really just kept it simple. I mean, the biggest thing I always tell people is she was my best friend.
Okay.
So why would I do anything to hurt my best friend? That was always the mindset. So if she's my best friend and she has goals, and guess what? Hey, what are your goals? Right? What do you want to do? What would you like to do? All right, because I just felt with all my military background, it's like I can take care of myself and my career and help her with whatever direction she wants to go in. Right? I want to be her biggest cheerleader, her biggest fan. So, because military spouse member, they always say, I couldn't do anything without my spouse. So my thing was I wanted to live that instead of just saying
Mm,
it, I wanted to live it in front of her. So for me, it was just being her best friend, right? It's like, what does she need to do for her to grow? And that was the other thing too in my mind. It wasn't just my career, but it was also what does she want to do, and then how can I help move her in that direction? And if she changed directions,
mm,
hey, no problem. What do we need to do next, right? How do we maneuver through that? And I think that helped us from a lot of different areas. 'Cause one, not just in her regular civilian life, but even in ministry. Like if I knew she was going to be working with women, well, what can I do? You want me to team up with the husbands? Just tell me what I need to do. You mean just be a chauffeur and drop you off at meetings and go back and pick you up? So, and one of the things I love when we went to our marriage counseling, um, Pastor Hay had us fill out, the information, and we couldn't see each other's answers, and then we had to come meet with him, and he went over it, and it was really good to hear that positive note that he said. Basically, was I don't see anything on here that's a red flag that would keep y'all from getting married and thriving in marriage, right? But one thing he shared with me was, he said, Darrell, I'm going to give you one thing to do. If you do this one thing, I think you'll find it very helpful in your marriage. So I'm, military minded. I'm ready to take notes and write all this stuff down. And all he said, Liz, was your job in this marriage is to help Veronica find her purpose.
Hmm.
And then once she finds her purpose, your job is to help her fulfill it. Best advice I could have gotten, because what he was telling me was, when you're helping her by focusing on her, she's automatically going to help you and focus on you. And that's exactly what happened over these 25 years. Whatever direction I went in, whatever direction she went in, we were each other's cheerleader in whatever that phase of our life was.
Yeah.
And it's reciprocal, you
Hmm.
know. Um, when you give to the other person without expecting anything back, it's automatically going to be given to you. And so we supported that. There was times when, he was studying for military boards,
Yes.
and I would be up. I might be sleepy because he may not have had to go to work the next day, or maybe he did, or he was about to travel. I would be up and I would be asking him the questions. So he's preparing because we got this thing. You got the military board tomorrow. So um, and spending hours doing that to make sure that he had the right answers that he wanted to provide when he was examined, the next day. But we would study when he was studying for weeks. I was right there studying with him for weeks. So
Mm.
we were just each other's support. You just got to make sure that the individual that we, and in all of that, we felt that not only did we feel when God tapped us both on our shoulder and say, hey,
It's time.
I want the two of you to be together, we felt that it was a calling from a spiritual standpoint, that God said it's okay.
Mm.
Because you can get comfortable being single and realizing that, oh, I'm just going to stay single. People come in our life and we don't think that it's going to be anything different. But God wanted us to have an open heart as to why we were spending time together, why we were
Mhm.
doing the things that we were doing. It wasn't just to be doing it, but God's plan was that He would make us a holy hookup, and that we would become what He wanted us to be, not who we wanted each other to be,
Right.
but that together we became who God wanted us to be. Because once we said "I do," we were one. And I think God showed us how we were separately
Mhm.
as individuals, but then how we were collectively as a couple, and the role that we had together in serving God and living the life for Him, and hearing His voice in telling us when to move. It was almost like God said, move, you got to move. It probably sometimes was a little scary for us because it took us out of
Yeah.
our comfort zone in some stages of that over the 25 years. But when we finally said yes, we realized it was easy, and it was easy to move forward and in step with one another.
And I think another thing that helped me also was having a mentor, right?
Oh.
So I always had mentors for my leadership part, but then I also looked for leaders that weren't just mentors for my career, but also for my relationship. Like, I looked at those individuals that had high rank and were married for a long time, and I would talk to them and like, hey, what do you do to make sure that the job doesn't get in the way, right? What did you do to make sure you still, right, had that love and that passion? And the advice that they shared, they willingly shared it. Like, they wanted to have somebody else come behind them to have not just success in military, but also success with the family. And I just
Mm.
love that the common theme that I got from each of those different mentors was, hey, this military stuff is going to go away. Only thing you're going to have left when it's all over is your family. So, yes, prioritize your work, but never let that be a higher priority than your family. And they showed me how to do that, right? Like
Yeah.
when we would go on different trips, TDY, we would come back, like they would tell me, don't get so caught up on trying to prepare yourself for the next TDY. Go home, disengage, right? Spend time with your wife, go on a date, right? Like, I mean, they made it like be purposeful about the time that y'all spend together. And having those mentors for my relationship were very helpful during my time in the military.
And for me, creating a village of women that were military spouses. And
Mm,
then I also had women that were in the military, but once they got married and had the children, they got out. So that was even that transition piece of it. So having really good friends that helped me in that way. And then I think for us, which we tell couples today, we found a really good couple to help mentor us through some of our challenges
mm,
we had.
Mhm.
I think that was very important, and that we both were willing to realize, hey, it's okay for us to get a mentor couple that can help
Absolutely.
us. We
yeah.
can do it individually or collectively, and then we had our accountability partners. You have your friends that really hold you to be true to yourself, true to who God wants you to be. And so I like to call those accountability partners, and I still have them today. They may
Hmm.
change over years as you grow and mature and have different changes go on in life, but always keeping an accountability partner and always as a couple having a mentor couple to help you navigate through things. And it doesn't even mean that you're going through challenges.
No.
It's just someone to just be the sounding board and listening. Hey, did I respond appropriately? I have this situation going on and I need to kind of talk about it, but I don't want it to be something that is not going to be healthy. And so that was it. And that was one of the key things is that we wanted to, based on our backgrounds, we wanted to have a healthy background, especially when it was going to come to us deciding to have children. And so we
Hmm.
wanted to be different. We wanted to find out from what was your background like with your family? What was mine like? Now, what were some of the good things that we can bring into ours, and what are some of the things we can cast aside and don't need to bring in? So we basically
Talk
did
it
not
out.
want to bring in baggage. Um, life itself is already hard, and you hear people talk about that all the time, and you always hear people say, like, marriage is challenging. And so we took the approach of how do we take that negative connotation of it out and really thrive, especially with the faith background that we have?
Yeah.
How will we not make our life be a hypocrisy
Right.
or be counterproductive as to the God that we serve? How do we make him be real, not just to us, but real to other people to have hope?
Yeah. There's so much that I'm like pulling from what you both are sharing. I'm gonna try to see if I can do a summary to like keep it. I don't know. I like summaries. They keep my brain together. So I'm hearing there was an internal stance of I'm gonna be focused on supporting my partner and looking out for their best interest and helping them pursue and go after the things that they're meant to in life at an individual level, not just from our couple relationship. I'm hearing that, again, you guys have that same intentionality that you talked about before in even like planning around parenting with
Yeah.
what what did we like, what do we not like, how do we want to be together, and getting that's like a very clear communication piece as well, because you're getting on the same page together and making the decisions and the choices together versus kind of like somehow it happens. And then the mentorship piece is really, yeah, there's some intentionality with mentors, like who are people that I respect, who are doing this the way that I want to do it, who have kind of gone the path ahead of me and can help us do this both as a couple and individually. And then also having a great set of peers who
Mhm.
are going to be, and friends who will be there to support you. I'm just thinking like sometimes I have clients that tell me like, we can't talk to our friends because it'll make it worse. It'll be like more drama type of thing. But that's not what I'm hearing from your guys' story. It's we have these intentional friendships that are also friendships built around support and growth as well.
True. That's a
Yeah.
great summary.
Yes.
Well, I'm just thinking about the time, and I know it is later for you guys where you are than it is for me. Do you have any final tips or words of wisdom for military couples or military spouses or military members who might be listening?
Sure. One thing I would tell the military members is they actually have, to me, an advantage over regular civilians because you already have this love of country and this love of serving, right?
Mm.
Being a part of something that's bigger than yourself. We would just challenge them to use that same mindset when it comes to their marriage. Always keep in mind that your marriage is bigger than you as an individual. Know that you should serve your spouse the way you're serving your country and supporting your spouse who's serving their country. And because the bond that we have as a military family is so special, because people that we used to meet, they found out that we're married, and then they found out we were in the military. They were like, "Oh my gosh, you guys must have such a special bond. I could never be married to somebody in the military." So it was almost like a invisible badge of honor. Like, not only are you in the military, but man, you guys are a strong military family, right? So I want people to embrace that military family title because it does carry with it a lot of positivity, right? And as long as you don't try to do everything by yourself, you don't try to, imitate what you saw when you grew up, but like Veronica said, create in your own marriage what you want it to look like. It can be so much fun and so everlasting. And one thing we challenge couples to do is to find out what goal do you want for your marriage. And a lot of people
Mm.
say, well, what do you mean? We're going to have kids, we're going to get a nice house, right? It's like, yeah, but what do you want your marriage to represent, right? What do you want people to walk away with when they spend time with you? And once people start like, you know what, that's a great question. Let's go back and find out what do we want our marriage to be and do. It just turns on a different light bulb for couples. So we just want to challenge them to, again, think about what's the goal for your marriage and how can people be inspired every time they spend time around you?
Yeah. I love that. I was just thinking I'm gonna have to go ask my husband how he would answer that question. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I guess I want to make sure, Veronica, if you have anything you want to add, I want to make sure you get a chance to also.
I just did what Darrell said because that is
Okay.
really the whole thing about it. And I just say, you know, free yourselves of unrealistic expectations. Become authentic. Be who you say that
Oh,
you. That's a lot of things because going into a marriage with someone with the military, they can have two sides sometimes. And two sides in that they're and knowing how to balance that because at work it's all hardcore and they don't always know how to take the hat off and say,
Mm,
oh, I'm at home. I'm in a
that's
more
good.
relaxed environment.
That's good.
And so learning how to have that balance and knowing how to handle that temperament. And it's just that they're goal driven or hard workers, but learning how to do that and then build trust to
Mhm.
allow the individual to be, don't have these weird things going on in your mind of assumptions.
hmm.
Talk about it. And that's what I mean
That's good.
about the trust part. Just, because there's so much out there. The world has so many things. And deal with your relationship at face value as to who you're married to, and not based on something you heard, or you're comparing your spouse. Um, Allow your spouse to grow into who they are, and for us, it was grow into who God wants you to be, and not put extra burdens or pressure on the individual because they're not meeting your expectation. But talk about what that expectation looked like for you, and just build a solid foundation, a foundation that allows your marriage to stand with the both of your personalities, not on past history of family, friends, even some of the people around you. But always have a network of accountability partners and mentorship um, couples that can help you. It may not just be one, it may be multiple people that can help you in various areas of your life. And I think from those key tools, you can have a successful marriage. And the fact that you ask someone to marry you, or you respond, I do, do it sincerely from the heart. And make sure that you really want to be married, and that you really want to grow into what that role is, because there's no set role. Every couple has a different role. And so it's for the couple to set that foundation of their expectations for how each spouse will operate in their marriage.
Yeah. I love all of this. Like there's so much that I'm like, I want to have a quote of this and have a quote of that and put it different places. But I'm thinking about the mentorship piece because you guys do this together in a form of like coaching. Can you tell us a little bit about kind of the services that you offer to couples to help them?
Sure. So again, we're givers automatically. So we're like, we're not going to be married 25 years and not want to help other couples. So we started Alliance Seminars Coaching, right? Collaborating towards success. And we just use, those time-tested principles to help other couples, regardless of premarital, or maybe they're already married. And I love how my wife said they may be having some hiccups,
Oh,
right? Hiccups can be solved, right, with certain type of strategies. So we just make ourselves available to help other couples, because that's what we always joke around when we were in Seattle. We were walking and we would see these older couples always holding hands. And we were like, that was the goal. That was one of our first goals in our marriage. Like, we want to be them, 15 years, 25, 50 years. Like, we want to be that older couple holding hands so somebody can see us and say, we want to get there. So we just, again, started Live Seminars Coaching just to help other couples um, reach whatever the potential that they have for their particular relationship.
okay, great. I will make sure that there are links in the show notes for anybody who wants like a quick way to just click and go to your website for the coaching. And I just love that you're doing that, and that you're doing that together, and it's something that you share. And I think that's so meaningful to be able to sort of have that mentorship from a couple who has walked the path ahead. So, yeah. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I have really enjoyed it, and I am really certain that so many people are going to get a lot of great things out of this episode.
Great. Thank you, Liz.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If so, please take a second to go rate, review, and subscribe so you get all of our future episodes. Make sure to check out the show notes to sign up for our free 10-week relationship email course. This email course is really designed for people who are maybe having trouble with communication or connection in their relationship, and helping them develop some quick wins right away to start improving it. While I am a therapist, this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not considered therapy. And it should also not be a replacement for therapy. If you think you need a professional of any kind, you should definitely go find one. Until next time.